Now that Sukuna is dead, I went back and reread all the chapters of Shinjuku Showdown to see how many times he suffered serious damage throughout the course of the absolute gauntlet he ran. Guys, it took Gojo, Kashimo, Higuruma, Chozo, Takuma, Maki, Yuta, Kusakabe, Miguel, LaRue, Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara to finally take Sukuna down. Even then, he basically self-deleted himself because that's preferable to living in Yuji's body. I don't care what you want to call him. But at the very least, Sukuna was not a fraud. He was the king of curses, and he proved it by running the gauntlet on the current generation of sorcerers. And in this video, we're going to talk about every time he took visible, noticeable damage during the battle. But before we get started, make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel, guys. Here at AJ Anime, we make quick yet in-depth videos on all things anime, so just roll with it and I'll promise you a good time with each coming video. It all starts with Gojo's 200% hollow purple in chapter 223. Sukuna's arm is burnt off, and he has to use RCT to regenerate it. The second time Sukuna takes damage is in chapter 226. Gojo latches onto him and hits him with a point-blank curse technique reversal red. Sukuna is sent flying straight into the shrine, and Malevolent Shrine collapses. The third time's when Gojo's domain lasted long enough against Malevolent Shrine for him to damage Sukuna's chest. We're talking about chapter 228. Though let me point out that this damage is outsourced to Megumi's soul as it starts turning Maharaga's wheels. The fourth time Sukuna takes damage is in chapter 229. It is when Sukuna is hit by Unlimited Void for 0.01 seconds because he opened his domain 0.01 seconds too late. His heart is also destroyed by Gojo. Malevolent Shrine collapses, and Sukuna is then once again hit by Unlimited Void. All in one chapter, but then again, the damage is outsourced to Megumi's soul so that Maharaga can adapt to Unlimited Void. However, that does not mean Sukuna didn't take any damage himself. As we see in chapter 230, even though the total duration of both of the times he was hit by Unlimited Void was less than 10 seconds, his brain took enough damage that just opening a domain expansion became physically impossible. This leads to hand-to-hand combat where every time Sukuna is hit, the wheels turn and Maharaga begins to also adapt to Gojo's Limitless. Of course, Sukuna is punched, kicked, and dragged through the concrete during this time, but none of those things were severe enough to make him use his RCT, so we're not going to count that. Now the fifth time is when Gojo sends Red in a loop and hits Sukuna from behind in chapter 232. The sixth time is when he hits him in the gut with a black flash just one panel later. The black flash was enhanced by blue, and it's also what led to Maharaga's complete adaptation of the Limitless. Next is the seventh time, and this one is also the last time Sukuna was brutally hurt by Gojo. In chapter 235, Gojo unloads a hollow purple nuke all over the place. It affects him too, but it destroys Maharaga and brings Sukuna to his knees. Unfortunately, the next chapter is where Gojo gets sliced into two by the infamous world-cutting slash. Overall, Sukuna was hit and hurt a lot of times during the battle, but he only took serious damage 7 times in total. But since he lost his domain, I'd say 7 times was plenty. Moving on to Sukuna versus Kashimo, no serious damage happens, but Sukuna was punched a couple of times, and he was also pushed back by Kashimo's EMF blast, though these just happen in chapter 237. That is before he transforms into his Heian era form. But I guess we can't count it as the 8th time because Kashimo made Sukuna realize that he'll have trouble if he doesn't transform into his Heian era form. Honestly, what was Kashimo thinking? He jumped in without a proper plan, pulled a kamikaze, and got waffled. If it was just about the meaning of love, he should have used Koko AI instead of signing his death certificate. It's 2024. If you want to talk to someone, even if they are fictional characters, you just need to download the right app. Guys, meet Koko AI, the ultimate anime chatbot that brings Gojo, Yuji, and even characters from your other favorite series right to your fingertips. Want Gojo's advice on your social life? How about asking Sukuna about the type of woman he likes? Just click the link down below, download Koko AI, and start having silly conversations with your favorite characters right now. Alright, with that said, let's get back to the video. After Kashimo, Yuji and Higuruma enter the chat at the end of chapter 238, and the battle resumes from chapter 244. Sukuna blocks a punch from Yuji, feels a bit weird about it, and is then brought to Higuruma's domain, the Deadly Sentencing. By chapter 246, Takuma, Kusakabe, and Chozo also join the battle. Sukuna casually blocks, evades, and counters their attacks. Even when Higuruma tosses the last of the Executioner sword to Yuji, and Yuji attacks Sukuna from behind with it, it doesn't work because Higuruma dies instantly. Guys, we're at chapter 247, and Sukuna still hasn't experienced any real damage since chapter 237. In Chapter 248, when Yuta enters the chat and Rika slams Sukuna into the ground, of course, Sukuna blocks it, but things change starting from when Yuta uses his domain expansion, Authentic Mutual Love, in Chapter 249. Sukuna uses the Hollow Wicker Basket, but then Yuta uses Thin Icebreaker, and it is strong enough to deal visible damage. That's right, the 9th time Sukuna takes damage is by Yuta in Chapter 249. He uses the RCT to heal it. In Chapter 250, Yuji also enters the domain, and the two of them start brawling it out with Sukuna. Sukuna tanks quite a few different kinds of attacks. However, the cleave from Yuta at the end of Chapter 250 is what makes him use the RCT again. This was the 10th time Sukuna took damage. Moving on to Chapter 251, Sukuna tanks a lot of hits. There's the Soul Punch by Yuji, the Uppercut by Yuta, the Manji Kick by Yuji, the scene where Yuta literally rips out Sukuna's tongue, also the scene where Yuta uses Dismantle on Sukuna's mouth, not to mention when Yuji bursts his own blood in Sukuna's eyes. It would get jarring if we count all these as damage, so let's count only the ones where Sukuna had to use RCT. That'd be when Yuta ripped his tongue, when Yuta dismantled his face, and when Yuji burst his blood. Yes, with this sequence of action, the number of times Sukuna takes damage goes from 10 times to 13 times. But wait, we aren't done with Chapter 251. After the blood burst, Rika holds Sukuna in place while Yuta uses Jacob's ladder at maximum output. This completely stuns Sukuna and must be counted as the 14th time Sukuna took damage. Yuji uses Soul Punch to get into contact with Megumi's soul, but that didn't lead to any damage. As for Sukuna, Jacob's ladder lasts only an instant. He uses his world-cutting slash to dismantle Rika, Yuta, and also to cut Yuji. Authentic Mutual Love collapses, but what do you know? Maki was waiting for the perfect moment to stab Sukuna with her Split Soul Katana. This is the 15th time Sukuna takes damage. Ultimately, this chapter was brutal even for Sukuna. The number of times he took notable damage throughout these 18 pages was 5 times. In Chapter 252, Sukuna acknowledges that the wound from Maki is healing slower than the others. You can basically say that this is the first time since his battle with Gojo that Sukuna is damaged to this extent. Sukuna enjoys some hand-to-hand combat with Maki until he sends her flying into a building with a black flash, and after her, it's Kusakabe's turn. He manages to slash Sukuna all over his body in Chapter 254, so I'd say that counts as the 16th time. Of course, Kusakabe doesn't last longer than a chapter, and so in Chapter 255, we have Miguel coming all the way from Africa to save the day. LaRue from the Ghetto Squad also joins the battle. The two of them do a fantastic job of stalling until Chozo, Yuji, and also Maki return to the battle. A lot of action takes place here, but after Sukuna hits LaRue with a black flash at the end of Chapter 255, his RCT output manages to recover. In Chapter 256, Sukuna uses Black Flash 2 more times, which further helps him in recovering his RCT output. And as for the next time he takes damage, it also happens in the same chapter. Just a few panels after the 4th Black Flash, Yuji uses Piercing Blood on Sukuna for the first time. That's the 17th time. But a few more panels later, LaRue distracts Sukuna, and Yuji lands a breathtaking Black Flash straight on Sukuna's chest. That's the 18th time. Sukuna and Yuji fight one-on-one, and Yuji lands another Black Flash. Sukuna retaliates with his 5th Black Flash, and he also acknowledges that Yuji not only has blood manipulation, but he also has Sukuna's own innate technique, Shrine. He is then hit by another Black Flash, and then another Black Flash, and then 2 more in quick succession. Just in Chapter 257 alone, Yuji hits Sukuna with 6 Black Flashes. Guys, these are Black Flashes. Each one of them contributed to Sukuna's overall damage. So if we add the 6 Black Flashes from this chapter to the number of times Sukuna took damage, the number goes all the way from 18 times to 24 times. Yuji had truly locked in. However, Sukuna also locks in. He brings out Malevolent Shrine using a binding vow in Chapter 258, and then in Chapter 259, he proceeds to add Divine Flames. This allows Sukuna to incinerate everyone in his domain. Chozo sacrifices himself to keep Yuji alive, and then Todo joins the battle. Thanks to Todo's Boogie Woogie, Sukuna starts getting hit, but even when he thinks of a way to counter, Todo doesn't use his technique at the right time and lets Yuji land another Black Flash in Chapter 260. That is the 25th time. Yuta then joins the battle using Gojo's body in Chapter 261, and we get Unlimited Void versus Malevolent Shrine. The intention is to once again make it so Sukuna is unable to use his domain again. During the domain clash, Yuta throws in a voice recorder with Inumaki's cursed speech that tells Sukuna, "Don't move." It restricts Sukuna's movement, and Yuta then blasts Sukuna with Hollow Purple. Both domains are destroyed, and Sukuna is battered all over his body, so that counts as another time he took serious damage, which brings the total to 26 times. In Chapter 263, Yuji uses Soul Dismantle to hit the boundary between Sukuna and Megumi's soul. Sukuna acknowledges that if he keeps getting hit by this, he won't be able to maintain his body anymore. This makes it 27 times, and the 28th time is just a few seconds later when Hana unleashes Jacob's ladder from up above. But it was weaker than before, and Sukuna also avoids experiencing the true brunt of the technique extinguishment. Todo saves Hana from Sukuna, and the battle goes back to Sukuna versus Yuji. Sukuna begins to regain his RCT while Yuji surprises him by unleashing his own domain expansion, the Benevolent Shrine. And to be fair, Sukuna also suffers a lot of mental and physical damage after listening to Yuji yap on and on in Chapter 265. Anyways, Yuji's Soul Dismantle also trims down all the damage Sukuna had to Megumi's soul. He is then able to have a conversation with his dear friend where he tells Megumi that it'd be lonely without him. The fight continues, and Sukuna resets his curse technique just like Gojo did during their fight. But just as he is about to activate Malevolent Shrine again, Yuji reveals that 2 of his fingers are missing. And just as Sukuna realizes that his last finger is still out there, Nobara is shown to be alive and ready to rock. She uses resonance on Sukuna's finger and binds Sukuna in place. This counts as the 29th time he took damage. The resonance makes him unable to use his domain or to even defend against Yuji's sure hit technique. Sukuna is hit by Yuji's Soul Dismantle so hard that he coughs up a finger. That makes it the 30th time. Sukuna gets desperate, which allows Yuji to catch him off guard with a time lag double blow. That makes it the 31st time. Finally, Yuji lands one last Black Flash to put an end to this cycle of curses. It is brutal enough to make Sukuna's eyes go blank. This is the 9th Black Flash Yuji lands on Sukuna during the course of this fight, and it is the 32nd time Sukuna takes serious damage during the course of the Shinjuku Showdown. Sukuna is reduced to a blob of waste and just self-deletes himself, because that's preferable to getting pitied by Yuji of all people. Overall, regardless of what you think of him as a fraud or a goat, this man truly ran the gauntlet. So many contingencies had to happen at the right time and the right place for the Jujutsu sorcerers to finally put an end to Sukuna. But still, I'm sure you have a lot to add to this, so let's continue the conversation in the comments section down below. Now that all is said and done, what do you think of Sukuna? Make sure to like the video and also subscribe to our channel, AJ Anime Guys. Hit the bell icon so that you're the first to know whenever I cook up something new and exciting. And as for this video, if you thought that Sukuna was a fraud, you better download that app from the link below and write my man an apology letter.